Simply Conscious presents Everyday Genius. Real-life stories of everyday genius, unconventional wisdom, and inspiring transformations.
Hey, Pete Craig here, co-founder of Simply Conscious, and I'm here today with Daniel Wagner, my co-founder at Simply Conscious. And Daniel's just come off an incredible interview, and this is someone that Daniel's been following, I know, for some time, and he's been reading the book, and he's actually been reading passages of the book out on Facebook to people because he's been so blown away by the content. So Daniel, tell us a little bit more about the interview that you did with Tej Steiner, because I know you were A, surprised that he accepted, and then B, there was an element of fanboy about this, because it's someone that you never expected to be able to interview.
Absolutely, and thanks for pointing those two out. These were some of the key learnings for me. Number one, first of all, I was blown away Tej accepted. It was one of these moments, Pete and I had a conversation about daring greatly or just moving with your desire. And I'm like, I want to interview this guy, send a Facebook message. Within a day, he came back. Within a week, we planned the interview. And before I knew I was on this call, and I was a little bit starstruck. I got to be honest. I'd be like, oh my God, Tej Steiner, And the first thing he did, which blew me away, he said, let's just drop in together. And he's like, let's close our eyes. And he literally guided me to he must have noticed I was just, my nervous system was all kind of tingly and really excited. Yeah. So he literally calmed me down. And it was blow away stuff. I mean, the book, Waking Up with Everyone Around Us, is an instrumental book in my life. Some of you might know I lived in community at New Eden last year, working and learning from Christian Pankhurst, the founder of Hard IQ. And he is, you could say in a way, a student of and a friend of and a deep kind of brother of Tej Steiner. His heart circle technology that he's for 40 years been experimenting with and deepening in is the foundation of Christian's work. And I experienced it living in community. And in very simple terms, it's an operating system for relationships, right? None of us have learned how to relate. There's no relation 101 at school. Yeah. We find it hard enough to be with ourselves. We find it confusing to be with another in intimate relating. And the most confusing part is, how are we within a group? And of course, the world is made out of communities, groups, families, societies, cultures. So we never learned how to do this. And Tej's approach is like, it's a genius download. It is something like conversations with God, where this knowledge didn't come from intellectual excavation or distillation of information. It came from the inside out. It's just eternally true and valuable. And I believe everybody could gain a lot from this interview. He talks about the 5 ways of being. So that's the content. But what was most valuable for me, before I even allow you to ask the question, I'm like, I need to share it. In the middle of it, I said to him, right now I'm observing myself being the interviewer, talking to you, Tej, over the internet, trying to extract information for my listeners. And at that moment, something magical happened. Because I observed myself being removed from life, there was a moment of stillness where him and I connected. And it was like, actually, the only thing that's real right now is you and me connecting right now. And we were both like, goosebump moment, right? Literally, yeah. Oh shit, yeah. Oh God, I'm right here in this present moment now. And then, of course, in these moments, I normally feel my heart opening, my eyes welling up, and I notice the incredible magic of life that I miss a lot because we are in the mind thinking we're doing something. So for me, Tej Steiner's technology, if you want to call it that way, is allowing us to become more conscious, more aware, more present, more loving, more kind, more human, and more able to be the best version of ourselves, remember who we are, literally, right, in our essence.
Perfect. And I know and I experience this because we use this within our own business, within Simply Conscious. As a group, we do this every single day. We have kind of this sharing circle. And so I know the power of it. If this interests you, if you feel that you kind of lack connection with anyone, whether it's a partner, whether it's family, whether it's in business, I urge you to listen to this podcast Tej Steiner is, as Daniel said, a thought leader in this field. He studied it for 40 years. There is wisdom to be gained from listening to this episode. So, listen to it all, absorb it all, and if you feel called, then read the book, Waking Up with Everyone Around You. And if you want to listen to some of the other podcasts that we've got coming up, if you go to simplyconscious.com, go to the podcast section, and you'll see those listed there. You can subscribe, and we've got lots more exciting podcasts coming. So thank you so much, Daniel. I'm looking forward to hearing people's feedback on this one.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pete. So, let's do the official welcome. Tej Steiner, welcome to Everyday Genius, a podcast from Simply Conscious, hosted by myself and Pete Craig. And we're here to uncover and reveal real-life stories of everyday genius, unconventional wisdom, and inspiring transformations. The idea is that I ask you a few questions and you be able to share about your work, your passions, your longings, and hopefully people listening will extract value. But I want to be honest, selfishly, I'm here for myself. I reached out to you because I find your work has transformed my life. I started reading your book, which I love. I love your poetry. So I just feel so excited that we actually hang out in this digital way. So thank you for making the time today.
Pleasure to be here.
So the intro here, 3 little simple questions. How do I know you? Why did I invite you? And what I do believe is your genius. So I know you through Christian Pankhurst's work. Christian Pankhurst, founder of Hard IQ, credits you in almost every teaching. Every time I see him, he refers back to the Heart Circle and you as the original creator of this Heart Circle. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. So I knew about you, about your book, but somehow I put you just too far removed on a pedestal somewhere out there and thinking, oh, there's Tej, and for whatever reason, your book was unread on my shelf. And then only 10 days ago, it called me and I started reading, and I'm so glad I started. And since then, I've been reading your poems to my little group on Facebook and just relish in the depth. And as a matter of fact, I was just reading this one called Hospital Maternity Ward, and it's a deep realization of why we're in such a mess today.
If your baby scream in the middle of the night,
it's painful. And I started actually putting it to music a little bit too, and I was really moved. I did it literally 5 minutes before we jumped on the call, and I was almost like, oh my God.
That's great. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'll send you the unfinished song after. So I invited you to this podcast because I believe what you're bringing and what you have access to could literally transform how society operates. Because we are, as a humanity, working in connection with others in groups, from the nucleus of the family to businesses, to tribes, to cities, to the world community. Yet we have not learned at any point how to do relationships. And that is for me the biggest learning I took away from learning about circle, trusting, connecting with men particularly, which was for me a totally alien concept. And I can now report that I have got real relationships with men, allowing to feel all these things that you think should be normal, but they're not. So that's why you're here. And I believe your genius is that you allowed this awakening to happen to you, and you took the courage to not shy away from it and continue to speak and live from the courageous truth. That's what I believe is on offer here. And it starts with your moving to Canada, to not being drafted into the war, and what that meant, and everything since. So, using your check-in technology, Tej, today, right now, what's alive in you right now? What is in you that wants to express?
Well, the first thing is I'm enjoying you're introducing this, because as you introduce it, you're basically saying what I would say. So, and I'm watching the words. Yeah, that's go right on, Daniel. Go. And the thought was, well, we could continue this, and you just keep talking, and it'll just be ditto on my part. So that feels good. What else? I find it striking that in this time of COVID-19, where we're kind of being forced to go inside our homes, our silence, inside introspection, and inside the small little groups that may be inside with us, whether it be family or one or two other people or just a partner, that who would have thought a month ago or 2 months ago that the entire world would go inside? And the change has been so dramatic. And so, from my perspective, this change astrologically corresponds to we're moving from the age of individual quest and individual perspective into understanding the group mind. How do we, and when we look at group mind, if we look at group mind from an individual perspective, there's generally the thought that the group mind, you lose the individual when you go into a group mind. It becomes the mob mind, or the we without an I. When in fact, the real group mind, a group can't be a group unless each individual within the group has claimed and is familiar with their own I-ness and another sovereignty.
Beautiful.
And so we're those people who are, all of us, we're going inside now with this COVID-19 in order to develop a greater, it's not even develop, we've been developing it the whole time, but it's a time to reset, to say, okay, the times have definitely changed. This is not normal.
Yes.
We've never before, Alice.
It is crazy.
Totally
it is the prayer we all had, and everyone was.
Yeah.
But nobody could imagine how could a reset happen. How would we agree to not fly around aimlessly? How would we?
Yeah.
How would the world agree to do? And it is.
Yeah.
It is the invisible ultimately that made that happen, and I find it. Yeah, I mean, with all the supposed suffering that, of course, is part of it, it was the necessary wake up, I think, for all of us, right? And the benefits are tremendous already in so many areas. And I love how you look at this transition from, I mean, for me, I notice it that it's the end of the guru age. I notice it's the end of the individual teacher that has supposedly a wisdom to share and people following an approach. What I learned with your approach, that it is already inside us if we allow it to be noticed. And then I also experienced dropping into true unity consciousness. What I've been seeking all my life through spiritual practice, I experienced as group awareness in a circle that just, after all the glitches and confusions were expressed, could literally drop into the spaciousness that is definitely beyond mind. And it's almost like you see yourself as part of a painting, an eternal painting. You look around, you're like, wow, I'm here. I have arrived in a place that was always home, and I just somehow forgotten. And it's like the veil being pulled and on and off. It's just a crazy experience. So my question is, how can more people experience that? Or is it even our role to bring that, or should we just let it unfold? What's your...
Again, enjoying your movement with us, because it's like ping pong. We're getting to play some good solid ping pong. But my interpretation of that is that it's all unfolding. We don't have to do anything. At the same time, it's always a paradox where there is something to do, there is something to understand, and Heart Circle is my attempt to really look at the question: how do we intentionally create a social environment where people can then access connection rather than be in society or in any relationship disconnected, and calling that disconnection normal. So Heart Circle is a way that because it doesn't tell us to do anything, they're just these portals into being present. It gives us a chance to consciously create access to this field that you're referring to, connection. Yeah, and it works.
Yeah,
but
I feel. I mean, what's for me so compelling, is that it requires that willingness, but without the will. It's not willingness from egoic willing, but it requires a certain longing, a desire to surrender to a degree, and it is only possible through the invitation of others that we actually move beyond that. It seems by ourselves we are confined into little loops of thought or behavior, unless outside trauma or outside shock appears. But in an environment where someone, the facilitator, or together we create a form of higher trust and safety, those two seem to be the keys to unlock that inner world for people. That's from my experience at least.
To me, that I would just adjust it a little bit. To me, those aren't the keys. It's that those are the kind of breadcrumbs that lead us to the keys. In other words, for me, the keys are, if you get a group of people together, whether it's just two people in a relationship or 100 people or a nation, but if you get people together and there is a conscious willingness to answer these 5 questions I bring up in the book that they're just essential to our humanness. They cut across religion and race and gender and nationality. Definitely age. They cut across everything. But if people are willing to get together in a small group and ask these questions, saying, are you willing to practice being such and such a way with each other? And then there's these 5 things that we agree to practice with one another. Each of these agreements, they act as portals to have us slide down into presence, which is one of your mindful steps. And they bring us into presence with one another.
I like how you say slide down into presence. I like that.
Yeah.
How you describe that.
The beauty of them is that this slide down into presence allows for people to be not present in the group, in the circle. In other words, it doesn't demand presence. It simply gives us a chance to find out how present we are. And in that, it's a very feminine model. It doesn't demand presence. It says, we want to be more present, and by saying that with each other, the agreement that we want that activates the actual calling forth of it. And if we create a container where we can hold alive these 5 agreements, and it could be 10 or 20 agreements, but these 5 are somehow essential, then the actual agreements that we want to practice this gives us greater access to staying present or to awakening. And those are the keys.
Beautiful.
So the actual questions become the keys, and it's.
So what I refer to as the keys were like almost prerequisites for the happening. I mean, because if people don't agree on certain on the container or on the safety of the container, then it's much harder to have those invitations. So can I, when you talk about the 5 ways, we're talking about the 5 ways of being as you described them here?
Yeah.
Being clear. Why am I here, literally, right? This is the life purpose question, according to this.
Yeah.
Being present. And I love how you say that. How can I just stop my constant thinking? I mean, the thinking mind is just take us away from the experience of the now. Is that a simple enough summary? Would you say that is true?
Yeah.
Being real. This is a huge one. What am I feeling emotionally in the moment? As a man to man, I was not even aware that I didn't feel until a few years ago. I learned how to mimic facial expressions that looked like emotions, and I learned to access 2 or 3 of them, mainly anger and vanity or something, right? And pissed offness or feeling entitled. So that was my range. How can people access more emotions? What do you think is necessary that we allow ourselves as societies, as groups, as families, to accept a wider range of emotion instead of having this very narrow band of what is acceptable and accepted? And I'm talking about the good stuff as much as the bad. If you show too much joy, people take you away, right? They think there's something wrong with you. So what do you think could be helping that?
Well, again, Heart Circle to me is a practical answer to that question. If you get a group of people, if you and I were even in this interview, if I say, "Hey, Daniel," and you say, "Hey, Tej, do you want to practice?" Not even practice. Do we agree that being authentic and really expressing what it is that we're feeling is okay between you and I during this time together? It's not saying that we're going to be real or authentic. It's saying we want to practice that together. And we don't then have to say we're going to be, because who knows? Maybe there's some things going on that you don't want me to know, and for very good reason. And there's something I don't want you to know.
So this is okay. So again, we're talking about the willingness and just speaking in agreement, saying
it's an agreement. Yeah,
it's agreement. That seems to be a key.
Let me just jump in right there, because it's so important to me. In the work that I've done for the past 35, 40 years with this group dynamics, I would say the thing that has most excited me in terms of exploring and finding out something is that culture is made up of agreements. And there's thousands and hundreds of thousands of agreements that we make with each other. And most of them are not conscious. There's traffic agreements. Now, some agreements are written into law, but they're still agreements. There's how we dress. There's speaking now, but not speaking in a certain way at a given time. There's all kinds of sexual agreements that we have with each other. There's just thousands of them. And if we want to change the culture, we look to the agreements that we've made with each other, and we find out what agreements no longer work for us. And then we change the agreements, and that's how we change the culture.
Beautiful.
So, in essence, our culture, if we take these 5 ways of being, they're antithetical. They're all agreements, but they're antithetical to what happens in a heart circle. And it's not just a heart circle. It's what happens when people who are wanting to be more conscious and more kind get together. Well, the culture in general, this is changing, but it's still in general. In our culture, the first agreement that we make with each other, think of schools and churches and a lot of families, the agreement is don't look at why we're here on the planet, why we are alive. If it's a religion, accept our idea of purpose for you, but don't find your own.
Yeah.
And schools, we don't have a class called Purpose 101.
True.
where the kids are able to actually look at their own purpose. Why are we here? And then that kind of reverberates out through life. What's the purpose of everything that we do? What's the purpose of my being on this interview with you? What's the purpose of you interviewing me?
Yeah.
And when we give room for that to be investigated and held as a value, it enriches the self. And when two or more people agree to look at purpose, it enriches the community or the relationship. But in the general culture, it's no, don't look at purpose.
So when you say, and this is actually a very powerful and simple notion, if we want to change how we are living, working, relating, parenting, then we need to just change or look at the agreements that we have unconsciously made or that are in place and change those to serve our agreed purpose that comes from our agreement right now. That whatever we agree to as a group, family, relationship becomes the container, becomes the energy that is allowed to move.
It does.
Beautiful.
And there's some agreements that have a little impact on the relationship, and there's other agreements that are
huge.
They're huge.
I mean, for
Like
example,
no, go ahead.
The thing about am I allowed to feel whatever I'm feeling, right? When I came to Circle and I was encouraged, it's almost like, what are you feeling? And you finally have the courage to say, I'm feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and pissed off. And people are like, great. And you're like, really? How is that suddenly okay? When all my life it was like, do not show me that.
The culture doesn't say it's okay.
So that in itself, that surprise of...
You can be sent to the principal for that, you know.
Yeah, you're normally in trouble, right? We learned it.
Be the principal.
So the next one, being connected. Am I experiencing love and connection right now? It looks like nobody ever was interested in asking me if I'm feeling love and connected right now. It was, again, this is a question that brings up so much. It brings up a lot of sadness for me because I realized that this was not important. It wasn't made important in my life, in my family, even in my own marriage, in my own children. Why did we not ask those questions? We asked about compliance and fitting in and not standing out and whatever may be the reason. But, you know, so
well, a little tweak right there again. Why didn't we make the agreement to ask the question?
It's a good, I mean,
it's just a subtle change, but it's not, why didn't we ask the questions? When I say it's not this or it's not that, I'm not correcting you. I'm just saying.
Tej, I love it because it makes me aware that my language is already pointing at an admission of victimhood and powerlessness. Because when you say, why didn't I make the agreement? It suddenly puts me in charge of saying, I have the right to make an agreement how you and I can relate right now. We can actually discuss it. We're not just assuming that there is something that is already here. So that's a consciousness piece, right? This is a awareness piece.
But again, a little subtle change. That's all from the individual point of view, but from a collective point of view, there's a systemic process involved where, for example, if we're kids in a family, we're brothers in a family, if the family itself, if the parents, if they don't allow within the family unit these agreements to be made, and the agreements are, hey kids, we really want to know what you're feeling. And we don't want you to project them out and splash them all over us. We don't want you to repress them. We want to really know what you're feeling so that we can find out what you want in order to feel better.
Wow.
And we're going to tell you what we're feeling too, without splashing them on you and without holding them and repressing them. So the family unit can then create an environment where feelings are welcomed. But without that, the individual has no way of negotiating, the child anyway. And often, any one member of a family, I don't know if you're like me, but in the beginning, I was the lone wolf of the family saying,
you were the odd one out, right? I mean, and these rogue odd ones out have created change and revolutions at times. But for me,
Yeah.
if you talk about a family, and I believe there are families out there in today's culture, the newer generations, that maybe part of what you speak about is a new normal. But from my experience looking around our age group, the opposite was true. You know, none of that was encouraged. It wasn't spoken to. My parents, war generation, blah, blah, blah. Understandable, excusable, still, a reason. I mean, your poem about the hospital ward, yeah, man, this is just, born in pain and separation and just prolonging the pain and then seeing it play out in our lives. Painful, pointing towards, inadequate upbringing for all of us. There's one big point that I love to move towards, and I just want to quickly run on this or mention this fifth way. The fifth way of being. So we had being clear, knowing your purpose, being present. How can we stop constantly being lost in mind? Being real. Can I track what is going on in my emotional body, and can I live, speak, express that? Being connected. Am I experiencing love and connection? And then being heart-directed. Am I following what I truly want? That is almost only possible if the previous things are in place, right? If I am not connected to myself, if I don't feel what to be felt, I cannot follow that impulse, that draw. Would that be? Yeah. I didn't even know I had any needs unless I was experiencing it in the last few months, where somebody asked me, what do you actually want? What are your needs? And it was almost like, I've never asked that question. I was just operating on getting on with stuff and being a good boy, whatever the notion is, right? To even talk to what is it you want or need. It choked me. It absolutely choked me. It was like deep despair showed up. Why is it so hard for us humans to... I'm asking a question like I was a little child. But Tej, from your experience, why do you feel people find it hard to access their own needs or speak to their needs? What is it in our upbringing, culture, or makeup, or DNA? Who knows?
Yeah, the first thing I do with your question is I apply it personally, where in some way that question of my acknowledging my own needs and my reluctance to give it any kind of airtime has been a life struggle.
Wow.
So I'm with you on that. And so it's interesting you asked that particular question, because of late, I'm reducing everything down in my own experience to this simple idea, and that is that we've got two basic channels. One is a giving channel, which is really putting our attention out to something, and it normally includes thinking. But anything where our attention goes out, that's one channel. And then the other channel, obviously, then is the receiving channel, where we let in. And I keep experiencing how clogged my receiving channel is.
Wow. And
how overstimulated my giving channel is. And I'm not just talking about giving in the sense of I give too much to people. That is one aspect of it. But it's far more than that. It's almost like an energetic, when I'm in, like, the best thing in nature, because you talk about nature in your work, being out in nature. I can go out in nature and I can actually give my attention to nature, and it can be extraordinarily beautiful. And I relax and I enjoy the beauty, but I'm still giving. I'm still in wonder of it, and it's still an it.
Wow.
But if I open my receiving channel when I'm in nature, something fundamentally changes where it begins to communicate with me. It begins to find me amazing.
Wow.
It actually feeds me or nourishes me. And then I don't have to even put out wonder. I'm in connection with it. And there's no wonder in connection. It's simply love. It has no expression except wow.
That landed really. That landed deep.
Yeah, yeah. And so I find that my whole life has been this constant outward movement of giving and giving and giving, when in fact what I was really working on was, how do I shut that damn channel down long enough to receive?
Wow.
And Heart Circle again is, in some way, all of us, all of our geniuses, we create something that we ourselves need. So I needed to create safe environments because my home was anything but safe. There was a rageful father running around with whatever he was running around with in his hand that didn't look good to us, heading our way.
Wow.
So I needed to create safe environments where we had an agreement. You don't run around and hit somebody with a belt. You don't do that. You know, you don't yell at your kids. And then all of that kind of negative, traumatic experience for me has led to I would give in order to anticipate abuse, try to ward it off. And everybody has their way of doing that. The culture itself is fixated on giving or outward movement.
Yeah.
And at least my guess is 95% of the culture is outward expressed. So we get back to COVID-19, and all of a sudden, everything changes. And we have to go back into these sequestered environments where we're left with ourselves. And what we're really left with is, okay, can I receive now?
Wow.
And that's the change.
Yeah.
That's the real change.
It's huge.
And Heart Circle is a place where we can practice. First of all, Heart Circle is a place where we can experience that this over-giving is okay, but we need to become conscious of it. And then it's a place where we say, hey, can I have your attention for a few minutes? I want to look at such and such.
Remember how hard that is at first, and then not just ask for it, but be in the presence where people give you the undivided attention, and you realize how much we're all starved of that, but how much we love it, right? When you get practice a little bit in Heart Circle, sometimes people say, can I have your attention? And you take it in, and then you say, oh, that was it, thank you, that felt great, there's nothing else I need. I just wanted for a moment to relish the fact that I was seen. Wow. You know, these very simple, and admitting that this is a human need, and at point that's all it takes, right?
Yeah, but you did ask the why so hard. There is an answer. If normally what shuts down that receiving channel happens very early in life, because what we're receiving is toxic.
Interesting.
It could be shame or blame, abuse or neglect. It can be anything, or sitting in a school environment where you're bored to death because nobody's really tuning into you. It's all external knowledge, and there's no connection. And so what happens is we learn to just stay in the giving channel in order to avoid the shock sometimes and the pain of not receiving.
Wow.
And then we normalize this giving channel, and we make heroes and leaders those who overgive. And we reward them.
Yes.
And
interesting.
And doing that, we normalize overgiving, and those people who then say, wait a minute, I think it's time to receive, are then looked at as needy.
Yeah.
Or they're looked at as
weak, or not heroes, right? Yeah, very interesting.
And this divide then shows up in masculine feminine more than any other place, where this masculine giving overshadows and rules the feminine receptivity of life.
I think that's the big question for me. Having learned about the way you work, I learned about the feminine and the masculine in a way that is totally new to me. And I studied different philosophies and religions and cultures and blah, blah. But that whole notion of the masculine, the holding, the giving, the feminine, the receiving, the moving, the asking, right? The world being the feminine, constantly trying to, get you away from the holding or the masculine holding. One of your big philosophies is that you, in a sense, a change in culture from the top-down hierarchical masculine patriarchal controlled society towards a feminine model. The whole idea of the circle is, of course, a non-masculine, non-hierarchical idea. So what do you think is the big significance about moving? First of all, your observation that we are moving towards it, and what do you think is there as a hope for change, or what would it look like when we move away from the control of the masculine?
Well, I think it looked a little like the Garden of Eden. First,
okay, nice image to hold.
That's the beginning. The other thing is, we do have an incentive to open this receiving channel, and that is, if we don't, we'll simply burn out. We won't, either in individual and collectively. We will not. We'll have to start over in some way if we don't move over. So the pressure to move into this, it's so amazing that it comes in the form in this particular point.
Yes, I
of the virus, because it, like you said in the beginning, it's so radically massive in terms of it's a game changer. But then right on the heels of COVID-19, of course, is climate change waiting in the wings. And climate change is the real issue, and COVID-19 is really a product of climate change in one way. I mean, it all is. But climate change is going to require the same kind of collective experience where the whole world at once is perceiving that something is out of balance and needs to change, which will call forth whatever your podcast. In other words, what's the genius of every individual, and what's the response that each one of us is having to this imbalance in life, and that genius is coming into balance. And then when we collectively work together, when a community of people support each other's genius, it's what community actually is. It's what family is. The parents support the genius of each child, and that's their genius to do so.
Wow.
I don't know what the question was, but
the question was confusing and multi-layered, so I'm amazed you even responded to some of what I put out there. But I love I remember the Garden of Eden piece, so that's really, really good. And there is it does feel like we're moving to a collective invitation away from somebody has the answers, right? It's just, we know this now, it is impossible. And also this in working internally, being more local, seeing local community. I mean, suddenly I noticed I have neighbors that I wasn't aware of. I was traveling the world, but now I realized there were people living right next to me I haven't seen, right? So that new situation makes you aware of so many, many things. I wanted to ask you, I've written some things down here, and they seem to get a bit blurry when I look at them right now, so they might not be that relevant. But from reading your book, or what I'm always curious about, is these moments of awakening, these kind of, there seem to be specific moments that were very, very significant for a life change, a perception change that made you do life differently. Can you recall one, or would you like to report or share one that was really a big one for you?
One comes to mind immediately. This moment.
That's beautiful. How come?
Even if I go past the cliche of it, even this moment, in that we've never done anything together here. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and here we are talking to one another, and maybe some people will be listening in later, but the chances of this happening by coincidence are pretty small. 7 billion to 1, I guess. And we both don't know really what we're doing here. Like,
that is,
we don't even know where we
true.
are.
I just
like,
know.
Where are we? I mean, we're planet Earth, but where's that? Or in the solar
That's
system,
true.
where we don't know anything. And we've come from a massive kind of patriarchally controlled environment, and we lived that, and then we've had to move out of it through our own life experience. And here we are, two men, just going, wow, what a trip we've been on. And we've been in history, we've been in the actual unfolding, so that we can get to this moment consciously. This moment. And inside this moment is all wonder and wisdom and pain and confusion and love. I mean, it's all there. It's the whole kit and caboodle.
It's actually wonderful that you've pointed to this moment, because when you did, I did feel my heart open and well up and the tears, because I am not fully present. I am still running an interview with Tej Steiner. You know, I'm here with you, but I'm also having part of me that is like, oh, how are we doing with time? Am I delivering value, right? So when you pointed to this moment, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, of course, now.
And of course, both of us have been totally, fully present the whole time. It's just we've been having to use our thinking in order to stay in step with what's going on.
Yeah.
And part of this this forward motion thing, we've been conditioned. When I say we, I don't know if I've been conditioned, and I see it in other people. But there's been this conditioning to overlay most activity with a lot of thought. And I mentioned that in the book. It's like the term I use, it's like dust on the grand piano. The mind is supposed to be used for strategy after we identify from the heart what we truly want and from the gut what we truly need. And so the mind is a strategizer only after the gut and the heart have been heard. So what do I need to survive and thrive is the gut. What do I really want in order to be in the flow of life or in love? And then those two centers or brains give us access to the mind, which will strategize. But if the gut and the heart are closed down, because we live in a culture that doesn't allow love to be talked about openly, and it doesn't allow for intuition and real sovereignty, we then end up strategizing the whole time, and the strategy is, what do we do without a gut and a heart?
Wow.
And then we all do that together, when in fact it's just like what you're doing with this work is that your gut and your heart are aligned by saying, I want to serve and I want to be in this work. And then you strategize to create a podcast, and you say, well, let's call this Tej guy. I remember hearing something about him from Christian or whatever. So the strategy is, the mind is really useful. It's just overused because we're not accessing these other centers of our being, because the culture doesn't, we're back to agreements. The culture doesn't have an agreement that acknowledges kindness and caring and true individual sovereignty.
So from all we were meandering around, you right now what drops in for me, actually it's very, very simple. If we as humans, even two people, create any agreement that we agree upon, we are creating a new consciousness and therefore a change in the appearance of reality. So we agree something. Well, and
you need to agree upon, because you could agree. Let's agree that we're both going to go out and kill somebody today. No, the agreements are, there are these essential agreements. It's like, Daniel, it's like code. These agreements that I'm talking about are light. I know this sounds a little flaky, or it could, but it's like light code that what's true can be expressed in the form of people saying, let's practice coming into the truth of something. And that's why these 5 elements, they really are true. All of us have to grapple with how do I sort out why I'm here and what's the purpose for my doing anything before I do it. And I've got to actually drop out of constant strategizing into stillness, again, as you said. And I've got to know how to negotiate and feel my emotions without splashing them or repressing them. And then I have to come into kindness and caring. And then I get to follow what it is I want to create in life. They're elemental. And but they're light code. In other words, we're light beings, and this is the reality of light, that we've got to be clear, present, real, connected, and heart directed. And they cut across everything, and they're just real. So when we get together and we actually agree that these things, we agree to practice them with each other, we're not saying how we're going to do it. We're not going to get still by doing yoga, or we're not going to do this. There's no code in the sense of a code of conduct or morals. It's we get to practice this and find our way through.
Beautiful.
Just by being the reality of the question. How can I be more present?
Nice.
How can I be more calm?
So these 5 questions ongoingly spoken about, being put into consciousness, practicing the deepening or deeper understanding of those, they will lead to change naturally just from the question being asked and the practice of this.
Being agreed upon that let's value these questions and practice them together.
So what is your experience? I looked on your website. So I experienced your work as part of a fringe community of people who called spiritual or have an interest in consciousness or new normal, quite weird ideas for most, but you also aim to bring that into the world of business. You have attempts to bring that into the real world. What is your experience with that? Because yes, us talking, I believe most people listening would say this makes sense. What Tej is saying is applicable beyond religion and other concepts. How does it work, or have you got experience of it working in businesses, in contexts that are hierarchical, patriarchal, controlled? Because you're bringing in uncomfortable questions, I guess.
Yeah. The first real experience I've had of bringing this into corporate life is one that just started for me a couple months ago.
Oh, wow.
In which I've been hired as a consultant for a healthcare provider here in Oregon. And it's how do I bring these circle principles into corporate life without bringing the fringe, like keeping the fringe jargon and cliches and all of that out of it so it doesn't scare people. And what I'm experiencing so far is that everybody is so hungry for the simplicity of, do we want to practice kindness and caring with each other? Before we go into a meeting, do we want to know its purpose?
When you put it like this, everything else sounds like insanity, right? You would like, why wouldn't we do that? Are we just agreeing to be aimlessly wasting our energy and being unreal and not truthful and cruel? If you put it like this, it's obvious.
What happens is that what people go, oh my God, you mean there's a possibility we don't have to go into all these meetings so nobody knows what they're doing or why we're there and we just waste time? So in other words, what I'm finding is that there's this natural hunger for these natural kinds of agreements or practices. And it does take there is a skill set involved with being able to translate this and bring it into an environment and use the language of the people already in that environment.
I believe that is the key, right? And you're finding, I love the fact you're doing this because it has to be in the workplace. It has to be in all form of working together.
Yeah,
families, of course, communities, yes, but workplace. Schools, oh my Lord. There's so much. Lord. There's definitely plenty to do. There's definitely plenty to put your attention to. a question that I'd love to just ask you for. You've done 35 years or more of that. What is your vision for you moving forward? What life's inviting you into the next step for you? I mean, corporate, is that a new direction for you? Do you feel called to now translate it into the business world? Beautiful.
It's one aspect. I think there's two answers to your question. On a personal sovereign level, I just get to keep doing what you're doing, and that is, to what degree do I, moment to moment, let more love in, or more, do I receive life more rather than my little habit of constant giving? So that's a constant practice for me. There's never an arrival point. I find that it's a constant daily thing. And then inside of that, I'm really interested in taking this into a lot of different environments and creating models for that particular environment. So one of the models is corporate. And I'm learning so much about how to actually implement these 5 ways of being in Heart Circle into an environment that doesn't disturb it. Well, it disturbs it, but it doesn't allow it to act in fear and thereby reject it. It goes under the radar and into people's hearts.
Nice.
And then there are schools, and the other area besides schools is I'm really interested in all of these spiritual practices that have spiritual teachers involved. Most of them are not utilizing the power of the satsanga, or the group, or the congregation.
Yes.
So they still use pyramid level, where the person sits at the head of the on the chair at the top of the room there, and they don't utilize the individual connections between people. And so I'm interested in how can we take, some of these groups have 100,000 people who are following them, but how can we activate those people getting together in circles of their own? That's a beautiful question. And try to duplicate the frequency of the teacher or the teachings through their own interactions, not through let's keep repeating damn teacher.
That's a beautiful question, because there's all the receptivities there, and the love is there, and the agreements to many ways, already there. But instead of focusing on the altar and the throne, it's like, okay, I'm here with my brothers and sisters, right? I'm already here.
It's us.
Interesting. That's beautiful. A question that I've written down, which is the younger self question. In my own personal experience, I look back at all the worry I had about things that never became true, and how concerned I was about life and so many aspects. So if you had some advice for the younger Tej, so what would you say to your Tej 20 years ago, knowing what you know now? So you're literally appearing to yourself 20 years ago. You know what, young Tej, let me give you something. Having lived 20 more years and having experienced what I've experienced, I want to share some wisdom with you. Anything that becomes apparent or is dropping in?
Well, again, not to be kind of whatever, but I would say be on the lookout for when this guy named Daniel calls, and make sure that you create an hour with him, because it'll be a good experience. So I don't mean that to be... Anyway, it would be on the lookout. No, actually, let me just tune into that. I wouldn't. I would say, keep up, keep continuing. It's going to unfold perfectly.
Beautiful.
You can't get it wrong.
That's beautiful. That's a really nice...
Can't get it wrong. There's no such thing.
Nice. Thank you. If you made it to here and you enjoyed this podcast, there is tons more. Pete Craig, his Everyday Genius podcast. You can find more information simplyconscious.com and look for the podcast section. Of course, find us on all the popular platforms. Also, we invite you to join our Facebook group and get involved to bring more of your inner wisdom and innate genius to the world. Looking forward to seeing you as part of our community.
For more real-life stories of everyday genius, unconventional wisdom, and inspiring transformations, subscribe to our podcast or go to simplyconscious.com. Get more out of life.